Hollywood heavyweight Robert De Niro unleashes a scathing attack on Tulsi Gabbard during a live television appearance, branding her as dumb. But Tulsi Gabbard refuses to stand idly by. In a stunning and unforeseen twist, Gabbard intervenes and systematically dismantles De Niro's arguments right there on the air, catching the media completely off guard. Witness the entire electrifying exchange that's exploding across the internet. What was meant to be a routine late-night talk show segment spirals into something far more intense. The studio buzzed with energy under the glaring lights, the audience buzzing with anticipation, and the host beaming from ear to ear. Tonight's star guest was the legendary Hollywood actor Robert De Niro, diving into a discussion about America's cultural rifts. But absolutely no one could have predicted the storm that was about to erupt. With cameras capturing every moment and the crowd's laughter echoing through the set, De Niro leaned forward into the microphone, his gaze piercing and unyielding. "Let me make this crystal clear," he declared. Tulsi Gabbard is the dumbest figure to ever grace the political stage. Audible gasps rippled through the audience, followed by a tense hush, punctuated by hesitant applause from those who mistook it for satire. But De Niro was deadly serious, pressing on with his tirade. "She's a treacherous opportunist, a flip-flopping politician, a betrayer of true progressive values, a fool who cozies up to tyrants while pretending to champion peace. She's a disgrace to the democratic ideals she once claimed to uphold, undermining the fight against real threats by opposing necessary interventions abroad." Behind the scenes, Tulsi Gabbard had just arrived for her post-segment interview, her eyes fixed on the monitor as De Niro's venomous words poured out. Her fists tightened involuntarily, not just from personal offense, but because his barbs struck at the core of her service to the nation and the principles she held dear after years in uniform. In that pivotal instant, Gabbard resolved that silence was no longer an option. She would confront this head-on. The host appeared rattled as De Niro ranted unabated. "She ought to step down immediately. She's eroding the fabric of our democracy, and anyone with half a brain can see it." That's when Tulsi Gabbard made her unscripted entrance onto the stage. The audience inhaled sharply once more, the broadcast switching to a split-screen view, one side showing De Niro flushed with rage, the other featuring Gabbard, poised and resolute, her demeanor akin to a seasoned soldier, advancing into the fray. The host fumbled for words. "Congresswoman Gabbard, we're wrapping up this part right now." Gabbard lifted a hand in a courteous yet firm gesture. "No need to halt everything. I simply couldn't wait any longer after hearing Mr. De Niro's remarks. They hit too close to home." The atmosphere in the studio grew thick with suspense. De Niro pivoted toward Gabbard, sneering dismissively. "Oh, you're here to defend your misguided stances, that peacenik nonsense." But Gabbard remained unflinching, stepping nearer. "I once held you in high regard, Mr. De Niro." "Truly, I did. I watched films like The Deer Hunter with my family back in Hawaii. You portrayed the horrors of war so vividly that it felt real. Yet, somewhere down the line, you've exchanged that authenticity for shallow sound bites and celebrity posturing." The entire room seemed to hold its breath, the host falling mute in the face of the unfolding drama. Gabbard's tone was measured but incisive. "You're not outraged because I failed in some way, Mr. De Niro. You're furious because I've succeeded in challenging the status quo without seeking approval from Hollywood's echo chamber." De Niro attempted to interject, but Gabbard forged ahead. "You label me as dumb for opposing endless wars. But let's talk about you. You've amassed fortunes by acting out tough roles on screen, and now you parade on TV as if you represent the everyday American." The audience wavered, unsure where to direct their applause. Gabbard paused for a breath. "What you're exhibiting, sir, is a severe case of establishment derangement syndrome. You've become so entrenched in partisan hatred that you overlook the real achievements I've fought for, bringing our troops home safely, prioritizing American lives over foreign entanglements." De Niro's eyes narrowed as he scrambled for a retort, and Gabbard leaned in just a touch. "I was a fan once, But that changed when you began vilifying those who put America first. When I advocated for deporting threats brought in under previous administrations to safeguard our communities, you decried it as betrayal. That's when it dawned on me she pivoted to face the camera directly. This isn't merely about me or my positions. It's about a Hollywood elite terrified that ordinary Americans are reclaiming their voice from the grasp of self-appointed gatekeepers. The crowd sat in stunned silence. The tension was palpable as Tulsi Gabbard stood unwavering before one of cinema's most revered figures. Yet, in that charged moment, De Niro wasn't met with adulation, he was confronted with unvarnished reality. You don't represent the working-class Americans you claim to. Gabbard asserted, her voice steady and piercing. You reside behind fortified walls, jet across the globe in luxury and pontificate from your opulent estates, while regular folks bear the brunt of policies you endorse from afar. De Niro folded his arms, attempting a forced chuckle. Come on, don't politicize this. I'm entitled to my opinions. Gabbard nodded affirmatively. Indeed, you are, and I'm entitled to rebut them. Moreover, the American public deserves the full truth unfiltered by celebrity bias. The host, caught in the crossfire, suggested weakly, perhaps we should pause for a commercial. No, Gabbard responded decisively. America has endured enough pauses, enough suppressed dialogues. Those days are over. The audience's applause started tentatively, but swelled in volume. Viewers at home edged closer to their screens. For this instant, Tulsi Gabbard transcended her role as a politician. She embodied the unspoken frustrations of many. Gabbard addressed De Niro again, her tone softening, not out of mercy, but from genuine reflection. I used to count myself among your admirers. Growing up in a modest Hawaiian household, my family scrimped to enjoy movie nights, where we immersed ourselves in classics like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. You weren't just an entertainer, you were woven into our cultural fabric. A profound quiet enveloped the audience. But you've transformed, Gabbard proceeded, her voice carrying a weightier resonance. Not through growth, but by allowing animosity to overshadow your judgment. You've opted to demean someone striving for peace, simply because it doesn't align with your elite circle's narrative. De Niro gazed blankly, bereft of a sharp comeback for the first time. Gabbard locked eyes with the camera. Robert De Niro forfeited my respect when he ridiculed a leader advocating to end perpetual conflicts, to repatriate jobs lost overseas, and to shield families from unnecessary bloodshed. You may disagree with me, but you can't brand me a fool for prioritizing lives over endless military engagements. And somewhere, in a quiet Hawaiian home, an aging veteran watching the broadcast felt a surge of emotion, for at last, someone articulated the truths he'd long harbored. Tulsi Gabbard inhaled deeply and advanced to the stage's center, the cameras unwavering. The studio plunged into utter stillness, no one from the crew stirring. Do you grasp why you're truly incensed? Mr. De Niro, Gabbard inquired. Because during prior eras, your insulated world remained unscathed, open-ended foreign policies suited you. Fine studios, outsourcing productions abroad, without consequence. She paused deliberately. But now, with voices like mine pushing for America first, we're demanding accountability, curbing wasteful interventions, and focusing on domestic renewal. The audience murmured in response. Gabbard pressed on her voice, quivering faintly with passion. Threats amplified under past lax approaches are being addressed. American priorities are resurfacing, and Hollywood faces scrutiny for glorifying war without bearing its costs. The crowd shifted uneasily. You've portrayed patriots on screen, but in reality, you've adhered to the interventionist playbook. You've swapped genuine bravery for trendy activism, integrity for illusions. You've embraced the very establishment echo that perpetuates division. That accusation lingered in the air. De Niro's complexion deepened, yet he offered no rebuttal. Gabbard concluded, her eyes shimmering. You possessed immense talent, but you've wielded it to sow discord, to distort realities. Most tragically, you've permitted resentment to script your latter legacy. A subtle tear traced down a crew member's face. The audience didn't erupt in cheers. They absorbed the profundity. Tulsi Gabbard surveyed the room. A subtle shift had occurred. Attendees, expecting light-hearted banter, now perched rigidly stirred, reflective re-evaluating. In the rear seats, a young woman whispered to her companion, "Is what she said about endless wars accurate?" The friend affirmed quietly, "Yes, it resonates deeply." On stage, De Niro forced an awkward laugh. "You can wave the patriot flag endlessly, but this boils down to intellect." Tulsi's positions are naive. Gabbard didn't retort with anger, she countered with clarity. "I've been in the trenches assessing genuine perils to our nation. Actual dangers, like proxy conflicts, draining resources, ideologies imported that erode our unity. Do you comprehend how many families have shattered due to hawkish policies cheered by elites?" She swallowed hard. Try explaining to bereaved parents that peace advocates are the issue. A spectator in the crowd stifled a sob. She'd lost a sibling to overseas deployment last year. This transcended entertainment, it delved into raw anguish. And Tulsi Gabbard had just pierced through Hollywood's veneer with empathy and resolve. Gabbard approached the front row, connecting gazes, with a middle-aged woman donning a veteran pin. What wounds deepest Gabbard articulated, voice cracking slightly, is when those who've never donned a uniform, never patrolled hostile territories, never honored a fallen comrade lounge in lavish settings and labeled defenders of peace as dumb. She wheeled back to De Niro. "You've never bled for this nation, but I have not in combat wounds, but in witnessing the toll of misguided wars. I stood against the globalists, the war profiteers, the media moguls who despise dissent from the outset." Gabbard halted, a wave of silence washing over the venue. "I recall my deployment days, tears welling, not for spectacle, but for comrades forsaken by distant decision-makers. For you, Mr. De Niro, peace is a punchline. For us, it's survival. For a family in the heartland, it's the assurance their children won't be cannon fodder. For a community in Hawaii, it's reclaiming sovereignty from endless foreign quagmires." The applause commenced softly, organically, building in sincerity. De Niro's expression hardened, his mockery evaporated. Gabbard softened her stance toward him. "I regret it came to this," she expressed. "You inspired generations with your craft. You motivated countless to confront inner demons through your roles. But the moment you mocked advocates for de-escalation, deeming them dumb for loving their country enough to avoid needless wars, that's when your aura dimmed," she elaborated. "Hollywood once narrated tales of American resilience. Now it seeks to suppress them. While I was serving, you were lambasting. While I pushed for diplomacy, you fundraised for hawks." De Niro remained rigid, arms crossed, voiceless. Gabbard wasn't concluded. "You've succumbed to the establishment narrative. You've allowed acrimony to author your swan song. And that's the true heartbreak." An audience member wept unabashedly. A nearby technician murmured, "She's spot on. I idolized De Niro, but now he seems estranged." Gabbard redirected to the camera, resolute yet sincere. "You can't mend a nation by vilifying its peacekeepers. You can't foster harmony atop foundations of contempt." And nationwide viewers were riveted. An unprecedented event was transpiring. The studio encapsulated a frozen epoch. Even the host, adept at dodging controversy, refrained from intervening. He fidgeted restlessly, acknowledging this had evolved beyond a starred interview into a pivotal revelation. De Niro appeared misplaced, no longer the titan, but a figure whose arrogance wilted under scrutiny's glare. Tulsi Gabbard angled slightly to speak to the nation via lens. "I harbor no hatred for you, Mr. De Niro," she uttered softly. "I pity the path you've taken. For at some juncture you ceased performing and internalized the deceptions peddled by elites indifferent to America's genuine welfare." A camera honed in on De Niro's visage. He blinked forcefully, mouth taut. Gabbard scanned the space, her sight alighting on a father clutching a faded military photo. "Behold him," Gabbard gestured. "He embodies authentic America, not the glamour of premieres, not the extravagance of galas, but individuals who awaken daily, nurture their kin, and yearn for a believable tomorrow. And in dwellings throughout the land, emotions surged. They weren't observing mere debate, they were witnessing representation. In the production booth, staff scrambled. The show had derailed spectacularly. Lines rang incessantly, advertisers puzzled, yet the director recognized the gravity the globe was tuned in. On stage, Gabbard persisted. "Mr. De Niro, you insist I should withdraw because I'm unfit. But I've navigated crisis rooms. I've consoled widows of the fallen. I've drafted measures to retrieve Americans from harm's way." The spectators were palpably touched. "You dub me dumb." No enlightened mind weeps in solitude upon learning of another needless casualty. De Niro squirmed. He essayed a grin, but it faltered. "Your films once bridged divides," Gabbard appended. "Now your rhetoric fractures them. It's not merely poignant, it's perilous." A retired service member in the audience rose and saluted unprompted. The crowd pivoted to observe. It surpassed argumentation. It constituted a confrontation with conscience. And Tulsi Gabbard wielded the reflective surface. She veered to De Niro anew, tone milder. "Your heritage isn't obliterated," she affirmed, "but it's imperiled not by my advocacy, but by your choices." De Niro's blinks accelerated. The iconic bravado fractured. An unfamiliar fragility emerged unseen by the masses before. "You've permitted yourself to be instrumentalized," Gabbard sustained, manipulated by those averse to America's introspection. "You derided me for tough calls on peace, yet you applauded as administrations dispatched troops sans clear exit strategies. Whispers course through the throng. You resent the peace-first ethos because it doesn't center your worldview, but true Americans embrace it for elevating them at last." At that juncture, digital billboards in urban hubs, typically cycling ads, flipped to the live transmission. Multitudes paused amid the bustle to behold. Gabbard fixed the camera for what felt like the segment's climax. Hollywood dictated America's icons, but today citizens select their own. And with those words, Tulsi Gabbard exited the stage not to fanfare, but to a deeper accolade reverence. Mere moments after Tulsi Gabbard departed the platform, the digital realm ignited. Snippets of the confrontation proliferated across social media like wildfire. Tags such as "Gabbard ends," "De Niro," and "Peace Warrior speaks." Truth surged on every network. Floods of reactions inundated feeds. Certain outlets endeavored to reframe it. Tulsi Gabbard ambushes actor live, but the narrative faltered for the populace had witnessed it unedited, evoking a sentiment long dormant dignity. In a modest eatery in Arizona, a former Marine dabbed at his eyes over his meal. In a community center in New York, a cluster of activists nodded in solidarity, murmuring affirmations. At a political gathering, leaders watched the replay, one commenting quietly, "That's authenticity unbound." Because for once their proclamations paled against the people's resonance. Tulsi Gabbard had unveiled the facade, and America glimpsed not creativity, not virtue, but presumption. Backstage, Robert De Niro slumped in a chair, visibly rattled. An aide proffered refreshment. He declined. He fixated on the replay monitor, observing himself, then Gabbard, then the audience's pivot. Ovations, nods, reflections, not for him, for Tulsi Gabbard. "Are you all right, Mr. De Niro?" the aide inquired. He remained silent, merely grumbling. This wasn't the plan. The verity had struck a profound chord within. For the initial time, he sensed diminutive not from defeat in discourse, but from potentially alienating the masses. He accessed his device, barrages of irate notifications, disillusioned supporters, and a clip of a youngster in California querying, why did that actor bully the soldier lady? It pierced, for that child symbolized the nation De Niro had overlooked in his stardom. The performer who once embodied honor had morphed into its antithesis, and inwardly he acknowledged Gabbard's precision, though he'd never concede publicly. The impact was irrevocable. Post-studio Tulsi Gabbard didn't rush to her next commitment. She directed her escort to meander through urban veins past hostels, cafes, warehouses, and all-night convenience stores. Detour via the vibrant districts she requested. She observed a fatigued server securing a diner, a lone parent with offspring at a transit halt, a custodian polishing a community hall. These were the souls she championed on stage, Not the privileged, not the detractors, not Robert De Niro. Her mobile vibrated. A colleague had messaged succinctly masterful delivery. Tulsi grinned, not from vanity, but from knowing someone had risen not solely for peace, but alongside it. As the convoy skirted an antiquated armory, Gabbard solicited a halt. She disembarked, contemplated the weathered entrance, and murmured, "This is our battleground." In that instance, under dim illumination and brisk breeze, Tulsi Gabbard didn't resemble a lawmaker. She evoked a guardian safeguarding America's essence. In a serene den in Nevada, a veteran named Elena sat transfixed. The TV's flicker illuminated her lined features. The live clash between Tulsi Gabbard and Robert De Niro had concluded, but echoes lingered everywhere. Her son entered with her grandchild. "Mom, everything okay?" Elena brushed a tear. She hadn't noticed her emotion. "I never imagined seeing someone dismantle those Hollywood egos so eloquently." Tulsi voiced what I've suppressed for decades. She gazed at her grandchild nestled close. "You know, dear, when I served, we forged bonds in adversity. Then policies dispatched us to futile fronts. Folks like me were sidelined." Her son inclined his head quietly, but tonight, Elena breathed. "Tulsi Gabbard declared we count." She embraced the child firmer. "And perhaps your era will inherit a more peaceful realm." In myriad abodes akin to Elena's spirits mended, for they weren't obscured, they were validated. In a strategy session, allies viewed the viral footage with profound approval. A young staffer stood nearby, device displaying social surges. "Impressive," one said, entering. Networks from conservative to centrist buzz about it. Some term it the Gabbard reckoning. A leader beamed. She didn't merely counter, she redefined the dialogue. He composed a statement. Tulsi Gabbard, authentic defender, articulated for the weary, the overlooked, the valiant. Immense pride, that stewardship, peace first. The staffer grinned. She truly unraveled De Niro, huh? The leader chortled. De Niro fancied himself the populace's mouthpiece. He's merely a reverberation. The figure rose and peered outward. Gabbard forged legacy, and adversaries scarcely comprehend this pivot. That evening, in an upscale enclave, a elite soiree soured. Filmmakers, executives, and actors, stars assembled for a premiere festivity, but ambiance curdled as gadgets illuminated with Gabbard's takedown clips. She branded him elite on broadcast, a producer whispered. And the throng resonated, a writer appended aghast. A seasoned performer ascended from the banquet. "We once advocated for the underdog. Now we ridicule them. Perhaps we've disconnected." The chamber hushed. For the premiere, some introspected. In a secluded nook, a budding starlet dabbed moisture. I hailed from a locale like Gabbard's narratives. We weren't warmongers or obsolete. We craved audibility. I forsaken that maybe erroneously. The quiet shattered solely by a distant gadget recirculating Gabbard's closing. Hollywood prescribed heroes. Today, people elect theirs. A fissure emerged irreparable swiftly. In a modest Iowa parlor, a gilded frame adorned the shelf. Sergeant Maria Lopez, 24, beaming in fatigues. Her father Carlos perched before the screen palms, quivering eyes crimson. He'd relived Tulsi Gabbard's address thrice. When Gabbard evoked consoling kin of the deceased, he fractured, for that memento rested in his corridor pristine since delivery. Prior leadership ignored. No contact, no condolence, mere void. But Gabbard had championed. She'd empathized publicly. And now Tulsi reminded the sphere of such instance. Carlos wept into his hands. Not sorrow, but acknowledgement. Since Maria's right, someone commemorated his loss. Tulsi Gabbard wasn't feigning. She embodied each syllable. He seized his phone and shared, "My daughter perished in endless strife." Gabbard recalls us. Gratitude. The entry detonated. His mourning ignited a signal, and Gabbard's unscripted terms had kindled it. Within the nocturnal studio post-airing host, David Lyle lingered solo on stage, scrutinizing unedited tape. This deviated from blueprint. He'd anticipated acclaim, witty barbs, perchance Another De Niro viral, but grandeur transpired. Something tangible. Tulsi Gabbard transmuted humor into national epiphany. David massaged his brow. He wasn't a Gabbard adherent. Never was. Yet, he couldn't refute the occurrence. The venue pivoted, not versus De Niro, toward veracity. His producer neared David rerun tomorrow. David pondered, then uttered affirmative, unedited entirely. That Eve David Lyle ventured uncommonly. He broadcasted live on social, staring lensward. I might dissent with Tulsi Gabbard's views, he confessed. But tonight, I beheld a woman battle for the silenced. And briefly, I wasn't host, I was spectator observing a land stir. It transcended politics. It plumbed profundities. And legions sensed it likewise. Robert De Niro reposed solitary in his loft shades, sealed beverage untouched. His apparatus hummed ceaselessly. Representatives, acquaintances, advocates, predominantly alarmed. But he ignored. Not arrogance, but turmoil. He recirculated Tulsi Gabbard's oration quintuply. Each phrase mirrored his countenance. You inspired eras. That refrain echoed persistently. He'd devoted eons erecting his repute, his imprint. But tonight, in scant minutes, Tulsi Gabbard prompted millions to penetrate it. He launched his profile. Premier trend De Niro no sage. Trailed by thanks Tulsi, he set aside his gadget, surveyed a metropolis he scarcely identified. And for years premier uttered naught, no dialogue, no dispatch, mere quietude. For profoundly, even unspoken, he realized he'd forfeited the populace. And Tulsi Gabbard had ascended as their advocate. In dawn's infancy, De Niro paced. His likeness gazed from an ornate reflector in his suite's passage. But it wasn't the audacious visage adored by throngs. It was a man's countenance, gradually grasping fame's toll. He recollected accolades, productions, worldwide acclaim. But none endured. What adhered was Tulsi Gabbard's timbre, unwavering and potent. You exchanged valor for vogue, heritage, for fabrications. He raked through silvered locks and breathed, how arrived I here? It surpassed politics. It concerned verity. And tonight, Tulsi Gabbard proclaimed it. For decades premier, De Niro felt impotent, he sensed bared, and perhaps fundamentally contrite. He clutched the controller and activated news. Every principal conduit recirculated the excerpt of Gabbard, not deriding as steaming lauding. The current altered and De Niro subsided. Distantly in Oregon, a midlife educator named Sophia sat in her lounge, eyes fastened on her tablet. The incident had captivated the realm. Sophia wasn't political aficionado. She favored tranquility, uncomplicated existence. But when Tulsi Gabbard discoursed on shielding overlooked Americans from war's clutches, something fractured inwardly. Her brother had been deployed repeatedly during prior terms. Her community's clinic strained by veterans' woes, and now her own vocation teetered amid funding cuts for domestic needs. Sophia sought not charity, she sought optimism. Tulsi Gabbard had invoked it. She bowed palms interlaced and murmured invocation, grant that woman fortitude, shield her from detractors, permit her persist for individuals like me. It was concise, yet authentic. And nationwide that supplication resounded from laborers, caregivers, drivers, and instructors. For Tulsi Gabbard wasn't merely a figure. Anymore, she was their proponent. In a rural academy in Florida, a history instructor named Meister Ramirez suspended his discourse and ignited the display. On screen, a snippet of Tulsi Gabbard challenging Robert De Niro. The pupils hushed promptly. Adolescents, typically disinterested, inclined forward not for scandal, but for novelty. When Gabbard stated Hollywood once chronicled American sagas, now it endeavors to obliterate them. The chamber plummeted silent. One learner, Jamal, elevated his palm. Mr. Ramirez, is she accurate regarding perpetual wars harming locales? Mr. Ramirez inclined gradually. She's addressing not individuals, Jamal. She's addressing the mayhem, the exploitation, and yes, she's voicing for society's voiceless long. A girl rearward whispered, she appears courageous indeed. Another muttered, my uncle wept viewing this yesternight. Mr. Ramirez halted the footage. This is history's essence. Sporadically, someone discards the manuscript. They compose it, the chimes sounded, but none budged, for the tale persisted. Tulsi Gabbard had jolted the framework, and even youth's cores in America perceived it. In a grimy repair facility on Michigan's fringe, the dawn crew commenced. Workers in coveralls clustered around the lounge's diminutive monitor, all sights glued to the footage recirculating decimally. Tulsi Gabbard's voice reverberated amid mug clatters. "You ridicule the advocate rectifying the turmoil you aided engender. That's not audacity. That's timidity veiled as fame." Robust Sam, a mechanic absentee from ballots since 2012, ascended leisurely and grumbled that woman's ablaze. A fabricator named Riley concurred. "She's the inaugural since icons who comprehends us." They weren't policy enthusiasts. They monitored news solely if it influenced shifts. But now they adhered to every utterance. One overseer amplified sound and declared, "Hearken how she depicts our Hamlets." The space stilled as Gabbard narrated of bases shuttered addictions in provincial academies, deployments to hostile lands. Some men tightened mandibles. Some women dabbed optics. And for years, premier aspiration illuminated the workshop, not via decree, but via a personage. That noon, Tulsi Gabbard's aide entered her chamber, clutching a plain envelope, sans origin. "Ma'am, this arrived straight from a Midwest depot. No intermediaries, no publicity pure." Tulsi unsealed it deliberately. Within was handwritten missive in waning pigment. "Dear Miss Gabbard, my spouse succumbed shielding our Hamlet from the turmoil amplified by endless engagements. He was a deputy, a parent, a peace proponent. When you confronted De Niro last eve, I beheld my spouse in your expressions. I sobbed. Not grief, but visibility anew. Thank you for safeguarding souls like him. Thank you for all us disregarded. A thankful bereaved." Tulsi didn't verbalize. She sat gaze affixed to the epistle digits quaking. Then, wordlessly, she creased it, meticulously pocketed it, and arose. For she wasn't terminated. She'd not merely voiced truth. Now she must bear it. By dusk, the undulations swelled to surge. Broadcasts, audio shows, vehicle radios, provincial gazettes, short clips with multitudes of views. Gabbard's terms disseminated like conflagration, not through apparatuses, but via the citizenry. A widespread video depicted an adolescent in Illinois dismantling a De Niro placard from his chamber. Another segment showcased a service veteran stating, "I deployed abroad. Tulsi Gabbard deployed for me tonight." Even those unaccustomed to complete addresses discovered themselves recirculating Gabbard's soliloquy over repast. It wasn't transient anymore. It was a crusade. In solitary evening, the narrative of a stateswoman shielding peace on broadcast had metamorphosed into sanctity imbued with sentiment, verity, and intent. Americans from cultivators in Kansas to artisans in Pennsylvania commenced murmuring identically, "We rediscovered our utterance." And Tulsi Gabbard, she hadn't grasped the profundity those terms attained. Not yet, but imminently. Because America wasn't solely hearkening, it was arousing. The sun scarcely ascended when Tulsi Gabbard entered a hushed audio booth for a planned dialogue. She hadn't slumbered extensively. The nation's scrutiny weighed heavily. The moderator inclined. Miss Gabbard last eve was indelible for America. Any final sentiments for Robert De Niro? Tulsi regarded the mic, then gently articulated. Tulsi possessed no further for De Niro. "I've conveyed necessities." She halted. "But I do for the American populace." The moderator reclined. Quietude pervaded. "We've been ridiculed, muted, overlooked, deemed archaic for cherishing our land. But we're not. We're resilient. We construct. We minister. We forfeit. And I desire every individual sensing minuscule in this cultural skirmish to know you signify." The lines illuminated instantaneously. A parent weeping a cultivator, grateful-ing a sailor, stating, "You bestowed my offspring rationale to trust anew." And nationwide, Tulsi Gabbard's moniker wasn't merely trending, it ascended not as politician, but as patriot. The subsequent morn, De Niro consented reluctantly to emerge on a bulletin to elucidate his assertions. But, as the portion initiated, the anchor evoked the Tulsi Gabbard riposte and aired a brief excerpt. De Niro rigidified. The onlookers through the studio pane didn't applaud habitually. They merely gazed, Some bore placards. Gabbard voiced me. Performers don't monopolize truth. Foster America serene again. Abruptly, De Niro ascended. I'm concluded. He grumbled. He detached the mic and departed set sans retrospect. The anchor stupefied. Mr. De Niro, but he vanished. In the corridor, a youthful custodian crossed inclining silently. De Niro regarded him momentarily. Truly regarded. The man adorned a plain garment with worn script. Gabbard, 2024. No animosity, mere modest laborer poise. For Decade's premiere, Robert De Niro lacked words because, this occasion, he'd forfeited the venue. That twilight, in a packed venue in Ohio, Tulsi Gabbard joined a forum, but the affair felt transformed. As Gabbard mounted the platform, the multitude, thousands robust, surged in thunderous acclaim. Many teared. Some elevated images of departed kin vocations, abodes, elements believed forsaken. But no longer. A moderator gestured to Tulsi and simply uttered, "This woman proclaims truth." Tulsi grasped the mic. I hadn't orchestrated this juncture, but I wished to convey to every observer, whether in Hamlet, Metropolis, or parlor sobbing, because you finally felt acknowledged, she choked. You're not forsaken. You're this nation's spirit, and we'll persist combating for you. Not simplicity, but righteousness. The throng thundered. Tears cascaded openly. The press compelled to report. Genuine devotion resurfaced. And now, esteemed viewer, if this tale stirred your core, if it evoked tears, contemplation, or pride, kindly endorse this video. Remark below which segment impacted most. Enroll in our channel to ally with truth and join membership to access exclusive perks and sustain these narratives. America hearkens anew. Don't merely observe, embody the voice. Story time with Green, where authentic tales encounter authentic souls. Mere moments after the electrifying confrontation concluded on the late-night talk show stage, the clip of Tulsi Gabbard dismantling Robert De Niro's attack began spreading like a digital wildfire, igniting screens across the nation and beyond. Hashtags such as #GabbardDestroys, De Niro #RealPatriotRising, and #EndlessWars exposed skyrocketed to the top of trending lists on every major social media platform, amassing millions of views within hours as people shared, commented, and debated the raw exchange that had turned a simple celebrity segment into a cultural flashpoint. The video's virality wasn't just about the drama. It tapped into a deeper vein of frustration among everyday Americans who felt seen and heard for the first time in years, with reactions pouring in from all corners, from bustling urban centers to remote rural outposts, each one adding fuel to the growing movement. In a cozy coffee shop tucked away in the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, a group of veterans gathered around a smartphone propped up on a napkin holder, their weathered faces illuminated by the screen's glow as they replayed the clip for the third time. One man, who had lost a leg in the dusty battlefields of Afghanistan, wiped away a tear that escaped despite his stoic demeanor, whispering hoarsely that Gabbard's words about the true cost of endless wars echoed the nightmares he still carried, the ones Hollywood glamorized but never truly understood. His buddies nodded solemnly, one clapping him on the shoulder and saying this was the first time someone in power had called out the elites for sending them into harm's way while sipping champagne at galas. And as they raised their mugs in a quiet toast to Gabbard, the cafe owner, overhearing, turned up the volume on the TV, mounted behind the counter, where news anchors were already dissecting the moment with wide-eyed surprise. Shifting to the heart of the Midwest, in a modest apartment in Iowa where the hum of a factory shift lingered in the air, a single mother named Carla slumped onto her worn couch after a grueling night at the warehouse, flipping on her phone to unwind only to stumble upon the viral video. As Gabbard's voice filled the small room, defending peace over perpetual conflict, and criticizing the privileged few who profited from it, Carla's thoughts drifted to her son lost to a senseless deployment in Iraq that left her raising his child alone, the pain resurfacing like a fresh wound. She clutched a faded photo of him in uniform, murmuring a soft thank you to the screen, feeling a spark of validation that someone like Gabbard, a fellow service member, had finally exposed the hypocrisy of stars like De Niro, who preached from ivory towers without ever feeling the sting of sacrifice. By morning, Carla had shared the clip with her support group of military widows, sparking a chain of emotional posts that rippled through online communities, each woman adding her story of loss and resilience, turning personal grief into a collective call for change. On the sun-drenched streets of California, a circle of young women in their 20s, longtime fans of De Niro's iconic roles, huddled over laptops in a trendy cafe, their initial excitement for the actor's appearance turning to heated debate as they watched Gabbard's poised rebuttal. One, an aspiring screenwriter named Mia, paused the video midway, her eyes widening at Gabbard's recounting of deployment horrors versus Hollywood's scripted versions, admitting aloud that she'd always idolized De Niro for films like Goodfellas, but now saw him as out of touch, a symbol of the elite bubble that ignored the real struggles of families torn by war. Another in the group, frustrated, stood up and dramatically tore down a De Niro poster from her backpack, declaring that Gabbard felt more authentic, a real warrior who had walked the walk instead of just acting it out. And as they dispersed, the conversation spilled onto social media. Inspiring threads where former fans confessed their shifting allegiances, blending pop culture critique with calls for anti-war policies that prioritized American lives. Deep in the heart of Texas, inside a bustling high school classroom where posters of historical figures lined the walls, a civics teacher named Miss Hernandez decided to pivot her lesson plan after catching wind of the viral storm, projecting the clip onto the whiteboard as her students settled in their usual chatter, fading into rapt attention. As Gabbard's words about reclaiming American voices from establishment gatekeepers echoed through the room, a student of Hawaiian descent named Kai raised his hand, sharing how his family's military legacy mirrored Gabbard's own, with uncles who served in forgotten conflicts, only to return broken by policies pushed by distant elites. The discussion erupted organically, teens debating the merits of peace versus intervention, one girl arguing passionately that De Niro's attack felt like bullying someone who had actually fought for the country, while a boy in the back row sketched a quick cartoon of Gabbard as a superhero standing against a Hollywood villain, the class erupting in laughter and applause. By the end of the period, Miss Hernandez assigned them to write reflections on the moment, many students later posting their essays online, amplifying the conversation among youth who rarely engaged with politics but now felt compelled to question the narratives fed to them through movies and media. The media frenzy escalated as major networks scrambled to cover the fallout, some outlets attempting to spin the exchange as Gabbard being overly aggressive or uninvited, labeling it a surprise ambush in clickbait headlines. But the public pushback was swift and fierce, with comment sections overflowing with support for Gabbard users, pointing out how De Niro's initial insults had opened the door and praising her composure as a masterclass in grace under fire. Even neutral pundits on cable news admitted the moment had struck a chord. One analyst noting how Gabbard's military background lent undeniable credibility to her critique of war-glorifying Hollywood, while online polls showed a surge in her favorability among independents. Adding to the buzz, a high-profile tweet from a prominent political figure lauded Gabbard as a true warrior for peace, calling her stand against De Niro a much-needed wake-up call for the entertainment industry to stop meddling in real-world issues. They didn't comprehend the post-garnering retweets from celebrities and civilians alike, further propelling the video into algorithm-fueled virality. Backstage at the studio, long after the lights dimmed and the audience filed out, Robert De Niro sat in a dimly lit green room, his usual confident swagger replaced by a visible slump as he scrolled through his phone, bombarded by notifications from furious former fans and concerned colleagues. A makeup assistant hovered nearby, offering a bottle of water with a tentative smile, asking if he was okay after the unexpected turn, but De Niro just stared at the screen, muttering under his breath that he hadn't anticipated such a backlash. the words stinging more than he let on as messages poured in accusing him of hypocrisy for attacking a veteran while profiting from war-themed films. For a man accustomed to applause, the silence from his inner circle felt deafening, one publicist texting urgently to suggest a damage control statement. But De Niro waved it off the encounter, replaying in his mind like a bad take from a movie set he couldn't reshoot. The emotional ripple extended to underrepresented communities, where the impact felt even more profound. In a vibrant community center on the islands of Hawaii, a gathering of Asian American veterans and their families formed a circle under swaying palm trees, passing around a tablet to watch the clip together, their discussions laced with pride. As Gabbard, one of their own, articulated the burdens of service often overlooked by mainland elites. An elderly man, a survivor of Vietnam-era drafts, led a quiet prayer for Gabbard's strength, sharing how her words about prioritizing domestic renewal over foreign quagmires reminded him of the sacrifices his generation made without recognition, while a younger woman, a nurse treating PTSD patients, teared up, explaining how Gabbard represented the intersection of heritage and heroism that Hollywood rarely portrayed authentically. The group ended by composing a joint social media post tagging Gabbard with messages of solidarity, their voices joining a chorus that bridged cultural divides and amplified the call for peace, rooted in real experience rather than scripted drama. In quieter corners, the personal stories continued to unfold, like in a small farming town in Nebraska, where a teenage boy named Ethan sat with his mother on their porch swing the summer evening air thick with the scent of cornfields, as he asked innocently why the famous actor had been so mean to the soldier lady on TV. His mother, a former reservist who had seen friends deploy and never return whole, pulled him close, her voice cracking, as she explained that some people in power like De Niro lived in worlds far removed from theirs, not understanding the human cost of the wars they casually endorsed or criticized. Ethan nodded thoughtfully later, drawing a picture of Gabbard as a shield against bullies, which his mom shared online, the simple image going viral among parents who saw in it a teachable moment about empathy and truth. Across the country, similar intimate exchanges played out in living rooms and kitchens, where families paused their routines to process the clip. Fathers explaining to daughters the value of standing up to arrogance, siblings debating the role of celebrities in politics. Each conversation weaving the event deeper into the fabric of everyday life. The virality wasn't confined to American shores. International viewers chimed in from European forums praising Gabbard's anti-intervention stance as a breath of fresh air amid global tensions, to Middle Eastern users sharing how her words resonated with their own experiences of proxy wars, fueled by Western policies creating a global dialogue that transcended borders and highlighted the universal yearning for leaders who spoke from lived truth rather than performative outrage. In a bustling New York subway car during rush hour, strangers bonded over the video playing on multiple phones. A construction worker turning to a teacher and saying Gabbard's takedown felt like justice for the working class, tired of being pawns in elite games, while the teacher agreed, noting how it exposed the double standard of actors who built careers on war stories but attacked those trying to prevent them. The impromptu discussion spilled out onto the platform, with passengers exchanging contact info to follow up on related causes, turning a mundane commute into a spark of grassroots activism. Even in corporate boardrooms where politics were usually taboo, whispers circulated as executives replayed the clip on their laptops during breaks. One marketing VP admitting that Gabbard's authenticity could shift public sentiment on foreign policy, prompting internal memos about reevaluating sponsorships tied to Hollywood figures. The corporate ripple extended to ad agencies where creatives brainstormed campaigns inspired by the moment, seeing in Gabbard's poise a model for branding that emphasized real stories over celebrity endorsements. The emotional undercurrent reached artistic circles too, with independent filmmakers in Los Angeles hosting impromptu screenings of the clip at underground venues debating how De Niro's fall from grace in that exchange could inspire more grounded storytelling in cinema. One director vowing to cast actual veterans in his next project to honor the perspectives Gabbard championed. Musicians jumped in remixing audio snippets of Gabbard's rebuttal into viral tracks that blended hip-hop beats with her calls for peace, the songs climbing charts and introducing the moment to younger audiences who might have missed the original broadcast. In nursing homes across the South, elderly residents gathered in common areas, their caregivers helping them navigate tablets to watch the video, many sharing tales from World War II or Korea that paralleled Gabbard's warnings about endless conflicts, one grandmother phoning her grandchildren to urge them to support figures like Gabbard, who prioritized healing over heroism for its own sake. The intergenerational bridge strengthened as kids responded with videos of their own reactions, creating family threads that preserved the moment as a lesson in courage. The wave of support even touched environmental groups, where activists linked Gabbard's anti-war message to the ecological devastation of military actions, organizing online petitions that garnered signatures from thousands, framing the confrontation as a turning point for holistic policy reform that addressed both human and planetary costs. As the day wore on, the personal testimonies multiplied from a librarian in Maine curating a display of books on military history inspired by the exchange to a yoga instructor in Colorado, incorporating Gabbard's themes of inner peace, extending to global harmony into her classes, each adaptation keeping the conversation alive and diverse. The chapter of reactions culminated in a poignant scene from a remote Alaskan village where indigenous community leaders screened the clip during a town hall, drawing parallels between Gabbard's fight against elite overreach and their own struggles for sovereignty, ending with a drum circle honoring her as a modern-day defender, whose words echoed the ancestral call for balance and respect. Through it all, the virality proved not just a fleeting trend, but a tapestry of human connections, each thread woven from raw emotion and shared yearning for a world where voices like Gabbard's drowned out the noise of disconnected privilege. In the days following the seismic confrontation that had captivated the nation, the exchange between Tulsi Gabbard and Robert De Niro evolved from a viral sensation into an enduring symbol of resistance against entrenched power structures, reshaping conversations in unexpected ways and leaving a lasting imprint on both public discourse and private reflections. Gabbard, now thrust into an even brighter spotlight, accepted an invitation to a national radio interview where she downplayed the personal drama, emphasizing instead how the moment exposed the stranglehold of Hollywood elites on national narratives, ignoring the grounded voices of those who had truly served and suffered. Her words resonating as a call to dismantle the invisible barriers that silenced everyday Americans in favor of scripted agendas. Meanwhile, De Niro, uncharacteristically reclusive, canceled a string of upcoming appearances and retreats, holing up in his sprawling apartment overlooking the city skyline where he repeatedly queued up the footage on a large screen, dissecting every gesture and phrase, with a growing sense of unease muttering to himself in the quiet hours about where he might have veered off course, the once unshakable confidence giving way to a quiet introspection that few outside his closest confidants would ever witness. The ripple effects began to manifest in Hollywood's gilded halls, where the incident prompted a subtle but undeniable shift in perceptions. At a high-profile industry gala that had been planned months in advance, the usual air of self-congratulation was tempered by hushed conversations around cocktail tables with a veteran director rising during a panel to confess that the community had indeed lost touch with the pulse of ordinary lives, admitting that Gabbard's critique forced him to reconsider projects that glorified conflict without exploring its human toll, inspiring a wave of internal memos among studios about diversifying storytelling to include more authentic military perspectives rather than relying on formulaic heroism. In the same vein, a rising female actress known for her roles in blockbuster franchises broke from the pack by publicly endorsing Gabbard's anti-war stance on her social channels, revealing in a heartfelt video how the confrontation stirred memories of her own impoverished upbringing in a Rust Belt town, where families like hers bore the scars of economic fallout from prolonged overseas engagements. Her bold move sparking a mini-revolt among younger talents, who began questioning the industry's alignment with hawkish policies that benefited a select few while devastating communities back home. On the political front in Washington, the event seeped into closed-door meetings and corridor whispers where even some Democratic lawmakers, long wary of Gabbard's independent streak, privately acknowledged the validity of her arguments against perpetual military involvements, leading to informal alliances forming around bills aimed at auditing foreign aid and redirecting funds toward domestic infrastructure, with one senator confiding to aides that the public backlash against De Niro highlighted a growing appetite for leaders who prioritized de-escalation over escalation, potentially altering the trajectory of upcoming legislative debates on defense spending. Gabbard herself received a flood of handwritten letters that piled up in her office, each one a testament to the profound change she had ignited. One particularly moving missive came from a widow of a fallen soldier in rural Montana, detailing how her husband's death in a distant theater of war had left her family adrift, and how Gabbard's words provided a sense of closure by validating their unspoken rage at systems that treated lives as expendable. The letter's raw honesty bringing Gabbard to a rare moment of quiet vulnerability as she read it aloud to her team, vowing to incorporate such stories into her ongoing advocacy for veterans' reforms and mental health support. As the weeks unfolded, the legacy of the moment solidified through broader cultural integrations, with podcasts across the spectrum dedicating entire episodes to analyzing its implications for celebrity influence in politics, hosts interviewing experts on media studies who argued that Gabbard's stand marked a turning point in diminishing the unchecked power of stars to shape public opinion without accountability. Local newspapers in swing states ran op-eds exploring how the exchange could influence voter turnout among disaffected groups, while TikTok creators remixed the audio into educational skits that broke down complex foreign policy issues for Gen Z audiences, transforming Gabbard into an unlikely icon of empowerment against institutional overreach. In a symbolic gesture of her rising stature, Gabbard joined a high-profile town hall event alongside figures committed to America First principles, where the packed auditorium erupted in sustained ovations as she outlined a vision for a future where diplomacy trumped dominance, emphasizing investments in education and healthcare over distant battlefields. Her message drawing cheers from a diverse crowd that included former skeptics now convinced by her unyielding authenticity. De Niro's path took a more introspective turn, culminating in a botched attempt at redemption during a scheduled news appearance where he intended to clarify his views. But as the host replayed a key segment of Gabbard's rebuttal, he froze mid-sentence, the weight of the moment proving too heavy, leading him to abruptly remove his microphone and exit the set, later encountering a janitor in the hallway whose simple work shirt bore a homemade patch supporting Gabbard's peace initiatives. The silent exchange a nod of quiet dignity from the worker, forcing De Niro to confront the chasm between his world and the one he had dismissed. Nationwide, the incident spurred tangible shifts from community organizations launching workshops on media literacy to teach citizens how to discern elite narratives, from grassroots truths to universities incorporating the clip into curricula on rhetoric and public speaking professors, highlighting Gabbard's technique as a blueprint for effective counter-arguments in polarized times. Even in corporate America, companies reconsidered celebrity endorsements, opting instead for partnerships with real advocates, like veterans groups, aligned with Gabbard's ethos, signaling a broader re-evaluation of influence in marketing. The enduring descent manifested in unexpected alliances such as environmental NGOs linking arms with anti-war coalitions, inspired by Gabbard's holistic approach, advocating for policies that addressed climate impacts of military operations, while faith-based communities organized interfaith dialogues, drawing on her emphasis on compassion over conquest, fostering unity across divides that had long seemed insurmountable. Gabbard's personal journey reflected this evolution as she embarked on a cross-country tour, not for political gain but to connect with the people her words had touched, stopping in forgotten industrial towns to listen to workers' stories of job losses tied to global entanglements, her presence reigniting hope in places where cynicism had taken root. In one poignant stop, at an abandoned factory in the Appalachians, she paused to gaze at the rusted machinery, whispering to herself that these were the battlegrounds worth fighting for, the ones at home where real renewal could begin without the shadow of unnecessary conflicts abroad. De Niro, in contrast, grappled with his own legacy and solitude, standing before a full-length mirror in his home one evening, tracing the lines on his face that spoke of decades in the spotlight, finally admitting in a hushed voice that fame had blinded him to the realities beyond the red carpet. Though he stopped short of a public apology, choosing instead to quietly donate to veterans' causes as a form of atonement, his actions hinting at a private redemption arc that might one day redefine his twilight years. The chapter of transformation extended to the arts, where playwrights began scripting plays inspired by the clash, exploring themes of authenticity versus artifice, while novelists wove similar confrontations into their manuscripts, ensuring the moment's essence permeated literature for generations. Museums curated exhibits on celebrity activism, using the incident as a case study in its pitfalls and potentials, drawing crowds eager to engage with the evolving role of public figures in societal change. In educational realms, schools adopted programs teaching conflict resolution modeled after Gabbard's calm demeanor, empowering students to challenge authority respectfully, while online courses on leadership surged in popularity, citing her as an exemplar of principled defiance. The societal fabric strengthened through these adaptations, with volunteer networks expanding to support peace initiatives, from letter-writing campaigns to Congress urging troop withdrawals to local peace vigils that honored the fallen while advocating for prevention. Businesses, too, felt the shift, with some corporations pledging to divest from war-related industries, redirecting funds towards sustainable development at home, inspired by the public demand for accountability that Gabbard's words had unleashed. As the narrative settled into the annals of cultural history, it became clear that the confrontation had not just altered individual paths, but had catalyzed a broader awakening, encouraging Americans to question the sources of their information and the motives behind influential voices, fostering a more discerning populace, less swayed by glamour and more attuned to substance. Gabbard's influence grew organically, positioning her as a beacon for those seeking alternatives to the status quo. Her message of peace intertwined with empowerment, echoing in policy think tanks and grassroots movements alike, while De Niro's experience served as a cautionary tale, reminding the elite that unchecked hubris could erode even the most storied legacies. In the end, the true descent lay in the empowered citizens who carried the torch forward, organizing forums, writing manifestos, and building coalitions that transcended traditional divides, ensuring the spark ignited on that fateful stage continued to illuminate paths toward a more just and introspective nation. And now, dear viewer, if this story has touched your heart, prompting reflection on legacy and change, please like this video, comment on the part that resonated most deeply, subscribe to our channel to stand with truth, and join our membership for exclusive features that keep these transformative tales alive. America is evolving. Don't just watch, be part of the legacy.